Hello, everybody. I'm hoping everybody can hear me and see the presentation right now. Thanks for joining us. So we wanted this just to be a session, sort of like a check-in with everybody, just in case there's any questions and things like that. And we're also going to be, reviewing the upcoming dates and some other ins and outs. We'll have a short panel discussion, and then we'll have an open forum so that if you guys have any questions, we'd love to be able to answer those questions. This will be recorded, so we'll have that available in case everybody here was able to make it, but in case people weren't able to make it or want to re-listen to it, we should have that available. So with that said, I'm going to start by going through just a little bit right now. So in terms of the unified recruitment, and we've said this before, the first year that cytopathology had the unified recruitment, which was in 2021, we had 71% of total programs agreeing to participate. And this increased to about 76% last year. And this year, I'm excited to announce that we were able to get 74% of total programs to participate. And I think that's fantastic. It's a little bit lower than last year, but about equivalent. So thank you to all of those who are participating again this year, and we hope that it's a much smoother year this year. I know that there was a few issues last year, but that's part of the reason why we're having more of these webinars, so that we can answer any questions or any concerns beforehand. And also one thing to note too, this 74% was of all programs. So we were able to get 100% response rate this year, which I'm really happy we're able to do. Okay, so just a quick reminder that the ASC lists participating programs on their website. And here's the website down here. So I'm sure everybody has visited this in the past. Really, we really want programs to go to this website and make sure that their information is up to date. We went ahead and tried to update everything at least a couple months ago, just to make sure all the links were still working. It was going to the appropriate fellowship page for your program. We have other information listed there, such as if your program accepts the CAP standards application form, if you're doing virtual interviews, but please make sure that these are up to date. If there's any issues or if you have any updates, please contact Jamie with that information. We can change that very quickly. Now, I just want to quickly go through some of the recruitment dates and other ins and outs. So part of the reason we wanted to have this webinar now is, as you know, the interviews are starting next week. So August 14th, on or after that date, you can start interviews. And then the offer date this year will be October 2nd at 11 a.m. Eastern time, a little bit different than before. And let's go into a little bit more information about that. So new this year in terms of the interviews, so you can have scheduled your interviews before August 14th. So that's new this year. And we did that because of responses from our program directors. I know it's summertime right now, and a lot of people are maybe gone on vacations, and trying to do it all starting August 14th was a bit hectic. I know as a program director for us, and in my experience, that was pretty tough too. It was a little bit hard to condense all that time. So this year you could have scheduled before August 14th, but like last year, prior years, the interviews themselves cannot start until on this date or after. Now, there's no required end date, so you could really, go up as far as you want before that offer date. And we continue to recommend that the interviews are done virtually via video meeting, but really it's up to your program how you want to do it, and also up to your institutional protocols. Now, new this year, internal applicants can be accepted on or before that August 14th date. This again was in response to some of the feedback we had gotten in prior years. Just a quick reminder that an internal candidate is defined as those who are currently enrolled in your program either a residency program or in a fellowship program, or who have already been accepted and will be enrolled in that in your program during the year preceding the offered position. So if you did fill your spots with internal applicants, again, please inform Jamie of that. We're keeping our website updated with programs that have filled so far in order to help applicants and programs alike. Now, if you have an internal candidate who doesn't accept your offer on or before that August 14th, a reminder, then they will go back into the general pool and you can only give them an offer on that, match date of October 2nd. It's a little bit more leeway this year. Another thing that's new this year is that the number of open spots will be listed for each program on the ASC website. So again, please email Jamie by the end of next week so she can update the website. If for some reason you forget, she'll be emailing programs who have not responded after that week, and then we'll update the website with that number. Again, this really helps the applicants know, how many spots are available, and if your program is full, and it just makes things easier and doesn't waste sort of people's time. If for some reason we don't hear back from you, or for any reason, if you prefer not to list the number, we'll just list you as not available in terms of the number of spots. Now, we're going to talk a little bit more about some of these things during the panel discussion, which we'll have right after this short PowerPoint. But I wanted to include some things where we get a lot of, relatively a lot of questions about. So one thing that I want to clarify in terms of pre-offer communications. Now, programs and applicants can communicate between the interview date and your initial offer date, the October 2nd date. But the communications should really follow the rules established by the NRMP. So sort of to summarize those, so programs, of course, cannot make a formal offer before the initial offer date. If a formal offer is offered before that October 2nd, it's in violation of the unified recruitment policies. So make sure that you communicate, if you are communicating with applicants, that is not a formal offer until October 2nd. Now, programs can choose to indicate to an applicant how they plan to rank that applicant, and vice versa. Applicants may choose to indicate to a program how they plan to rank that program. But a program cannot ask applicants how they plan to rank their program, and vice versa. Applicants really cannot ask programs how they plan to rank the applicant. And I know this was an issue last year. I know I experienced it. I would say a lot of the applicants that we interviewed actually did ask for a ranking, and it does put us in a precarious, situation. So there's a number of ways to handle that, and we'll get into some of that during the panel discussion. But if you're not comfortable giving an applicant a ranking, or saying something like you're our top choice or one of our top choices, then I would just be honest with them and say, we're not giving any sort of rank list at this time, and we're not able to tell you if you're top or not top candidate. So programs and applicants cannot indicate a contingency type of ranking. For instance, like, we will make you a an offer if we know you will accept it. That's absolutely not allowed. But you can say you're one of our top applicants, or you're our top applicant, something like that. And programs and applicants really should be honest in their communication with one another. And really, if we do this in a way that's honest and has integrity, these pre-offer communications actually can be very helpful in optimizing the system. So again, we'll get a little bit into this during the panel discussion. So again, the offer date is October 2nd this year. Programs can start making offers by email beginning at 11 a.m. Eastern time. That's a little bit new this year, like having like the actual time. And this was in response to some feedback that we had gotten, not just us. I think a lot of it was from the surge path, other surge path specialties, subspecialties, who are also participating in a unified timeline. It seemed like some phone calls and messages were going out a little bit early, so we decided to make it 11 a.m. Eastern time so that applicants aren't getting emails at like, 2 a.m. that day and things like that. And also we asked that you not initiate phone calls or text messages outside of, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. in the applicant's local time zone. Now, one thing that I want to stress is that the number of initial offers must be equal to or less than, I can't think of a situation where it'd be less than, but the number of available positions that your program has. So you can't give more offers than what you have to offer. And this is sort of leading on to the next slide, but really this is true for any time, with subsequent offers and things like that. So the number of offers that you have at any time given cannot be more than the number of unfilled positions that you have at that time. And again, we'll get into a little bit more details of this. So another thing that's new this year is that, and this was from a lot of feedback, and we actually fought really hard to reduce the offer, accept decline period from 72 hours to 24 hours. There was a lot of debate with the Association of Pathology chairs, the APC, with this, but a lot of the subspecialty chairs, including myself, felt very strongly based off of what we had heard from our program directors that 24 hours is really sufficient. And we have asked, we have had at least one webinar with applicants or residents, and we have stressed to them this year, please make some sort of mental or physical sort of list in your mind of how you would rank places where you have interviewed, so that during that offer day, you have an idea of how you're going to rank people. So we're hoping this year that day is smoother than especially last year. Now, all offers must be valid for at least 24 hours from the date and timestamp of that email. So not just that initial email, but subsequent emails as well. After that 24 hours, the program may offer the position to another applicant if that initial applicant has not responded to the offer. So once you've made an offer to another applicant, that original offer is then void. So again, you can't have more offers out at any time than how many positions you have available. Now, say that first applicant comes and indicates to you after that 24-hour period, and you've already given another applicant that offer now, and they say they want to accept it now. Unfortunately, that has been void. So they have to wait until you have an open, unoffered position. Now, a few more things. So when an applicant accepts an offer, it is considered final. Neither the program nor the applicant can withdraw from that agreement. And I know there were some issues last year, but we're trying to stress this as much as we can to the applicants. And programs cannot knowingly make offers to applicants who have accepted another position. So I know that there were some instances last year where applicants got another offer and then reneged on the first one that they got. So we're really trying to crack down on that. We have specified that that's not allowed in the regulations as well as the code of conduct. And so we're hoping that that doesn't, it didn't happen much last year, but we know that it happened. So we're hoping that that doesn't continue to happen. Now, one thing that I want to stress is please communicate your program status to Jamie when you've filled, so that we can really ensure that the ASD website is updated in real time. And I think this will really help facilitate applicants finding positions that they're looking for, after that offer date, and also programs who didn't fill with their, first, second, third applicants. Then also their programs will then be sort of advertised there, and applicants will know that their program still needs to be filled. Now, very quickly, I just want to mention and remind everybody that, we're continuing the timeline this year. 74% of total programs is excellent, I think. However, the question remains is if we're going to continue with the unified timeline this year. If we do continue with it, are we going to make modifications such as changing the cycle dates, or do we revert to a non-standard sort of timeline, or do we go to a formal match? And I'm going to say upfront, the ASC has no preference one way. It's not like I know that we're sponsoring the unified timeline, but it's completely up to our program directors which way we go in the future. And so I want you guys to be on the lookout for a survey sometime after the recruitment cycle this year, probably in early October, sometime between the end of the cycle and the ASC meeting. Look out for a survey because it'll be very important for everybody to fill this very short survey out, just sort of trying to get a sense of where people are at in terms of how they want to move forward. And with that, that's the conclusion of this short PowerPoint. And I want to move into a panel discussion where we go through some of the topics that I touched on in the PowerPoint. And then after this short panel discussion, we're going to open it up to a Q&A so that if you have any questions on anything that we discussed or any other concerns, you can feel free to answer that. And at least I can stay on as long as people want to answer those. So first, before we get started, can those on the panel introduce themselves? And we could just go in any order.
Sure, I'm Jalal Jalaly. I'm the program director for the Cytopathology program at the University of Pennsylvania.
Hi, I'm Rema Rao. I was one of the program directors at Montefiore, and I'm the program director committee. And now I'm at Cleveland Clinic. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Dr. Kim Ely, and I am at Vanderbilt University Medical Center at Nashville, and I'm the current program director.
Hi, I'm Dr. Rose Wu. I'm an associate program director for the residency program here at the Hospital of the University of Pennsylvania. So Jalal's our Cyto Fellow program director. I'm currently vice chair of this Cytopathology Program Directors Committee and have been following along with the unified timeline since we put it together with Sarah Monaco a couple of years ago, and have been really rooting for us to either move forward with this or move to a match. So interested in discussing with the rest of you.
Thank you so much to everybody for joining. We just have a few prepared questions right now. And again, this is really based off of some of the feedback we've gotten and questions in the past, and bouncing off of some of the things that we just discussed. So to the panel, how are you choosing to interview applicants this year? Is it virtual, in person, or a combination?
I can speak on behalf of my program. I think Kate did who is on the call, and she can jump in to rescue because I just started at Cleveland Clinic, but I can give a little bit of my prior perspective in this. Previous to this, we've chosen to do virtual only. And I think in Cleveland Clinic, we're continuing to do the virtual only interview for this year. I think COVID kind of opened that really nice door where people don't have to fly across and unless they really want to. So I also had the option when I was at Monty to welcome them for a second visit if they were interested in coming after the virtual interview. So that door is always open for them to come over, but the first interview is always virtual.
Sorry, Kim, you can go. Thank you. Similar in our experience, since COVID, we've been interviewing applicants virtually, and this is the way we're going to move forward this year as well. This has been a recommendation also from our ACGME designated official, who recommended that we interview virtually, and we also may offer a second visit for those applicants that are interested in coming and seeing the institution themselves. But the recommendation was that our applicants would be ranked before they come and visit in person, and that shouldn't affect the way they are ranked after their visit, because it can introduce some bias for when applicants visit in person. So even our internal candidates are going to be interviewing virtually just to level the field.
And we're doing the same thing. Our interviews are all conducted virtually. It does feel a little bit awkward for an internal applicant who you know and developed a relationship to interview virtually. But we've just kind of explained that in an effort, as you said, to level the playing field, we're going to interview everyone in that manner.
Yeah, I think that's all excellent. Just, you know, one thing, of course, to remember is that we just want everything to be equitable, or at least as equitable as possible. And I think that doing things virtual, at least having the initial interview be virtual, really helps address that. You know, applicants are able to see more programs, and in turn, programs are able to see more applicants as well, and really find who matches the best with their program. And I do like I do like there being some sort of in-person aspect to that. I know because of COVID, we weren't able to have people even come for tours in the past few years. But I do like at least having some aspect of it be in person if your institution allows for that, because then you really do get a sense of the applicant. And I know I've seen people later in meetings and things like that, and it was just a whole different impression of that person when you actually meet them in person and can really interact with them. So I do think it's helpful if you're able to allow people to come for, if nothing else, an in-person tour to get more sense of, you know, that person and how they would fit in your program. But again, as long as everything is equitable, like you shouldn't penalize somebody for not being able to come in person for any reason, then I think that's the main thing.
I think at the end of every interview, we do kind of, you know, open that conversation saying you are welcome to come in for a visit if you would like. So that's always provided. I think that's very helpful, like you mentioned.
Yeah, perfect.
It's always kind of a balance, because even though, you know, we would love for everyone to come and see our facilities and meet us in person, the whole equity issue has been at the forefront of interviews in the past few years. And I don't think virtual interviews are going away, despite a lot of applicants, I think, still wanting to come in person to help them with their decision-making process. So I think the compromise that we've come to, as you've all started to do, is the virtual for everybody, including internal applicants, and then potentially an option to do an in-person visit if that applicant chooses, but after we put together our rank list and before they need to make a decision on the offers that they receive. Probably a very narrow window.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. And then, okay, so how did you advertise your program either this year or in years past? And particularly if anybody had any issues with having like a sufficient number of applicants, was there something that you did to sort of try to get more applicants? I could say, like, for one thing that I think that's helpful is that if you do we did this at least the first year or two when we started the timeline, was advertise our program just using social media. I think something as simple as like making a Twitter, or I don't know if it's X post now. I think something as simple as that and having a link to your program website can be very helpful. It can really help highlight some of the attributes of your program. And of course, you know, we have a link to everybody's website on the ASC webpage. So I think really optimizing your webpage goes a long way as well, because applicants are going to have your webpage. And so just make sure things are up to date on your webpage. You know, if you have faculty that have had great publications or anything that you think makes your program stand out, I would include that in your webpage, especially if you're a smaller program. And I think it's important to highlight the attributes that you want to highlight to applicants. And those are easy ways to do that, relatively easy ways to do that.
I think I think it was a couple of years ago, we definitely used path outlines as well. But that stopped
Mhm.
after kind of, last year or so. So it's word of mouth, listing on the
Yeah.
websites and social media.
Yeah, I think the using Twitter, and I'm not as versed in it. Fortunately, some of my other colleagues are. And then like continually throughout the year, they'll update it, like you said, Vanda, with sessions that we might give at ASC or an important paper that came out,
Yeah.
or just
Mhm.
something fun that we do, like for Papa Nicolau Day. I make these
Yeah,
cupcakes
yeah.
into different cells, like high grade dysplasia, and I'll do like herpes. So we'll just send out like fun things like that as well to highlight some of the things that we're doing with our program, both socially and academically.
That's a great point you bring up, Kim. I definitely remember seeing Vanderbilt have some nice outings on social media. So I think that's a great, fantastic way to sort of highlight some of those things that, applicants, may draw them to that program, something as simple as that. Okay, perfect. Next, and this came up a lot. Again, I know in my personal experience last year, especially, there were a lot of applicants asking, about their positions and things like that. So, this is both related to this question and the next question, but both how have you approached applicants so if an applicant comes to you asking for a ranking, how have you approached that? And then the next question will be sort of vice versa, but so an applicant comes to you asking for a ranking, how have you approached that? What has been your response to them?
I mean, for me, I can speak to the fact that, I mean, the way we, as faculty in cytopathology, we interview all candidates, and we don't usually sit together and look at all the kind of individual scores and the ranks until toward the very end. And usually when applicants reach out to me, it's still early in the process, so it's easy for me to respond and tell them the truth that it's still early for us in the process, and we are going to wait until everybody interviews everyone before we actually formalize a rank list. So in my experience, I haven't had an issue with someone reaching out when we actually have a rank list ready. Probably if that happened for a top candidate, I'll tell them that you are a top candidate, but I'm not very sure of how to respond if the candidate is kind of in the mid or low of the top of the rank list, to be honest. That can be a little bit tricky.
Yeah, same here. I think I've had this before, and I've always referred the candidates to the guidelines because they are also aware of the guidelines. And I tell them that we haven't decided the rank order listing is as per the timeline and deadline, and if they're good candidates, we're like, yes, you're one of our top candidates, but the rank order, we will let you know closer, after the rank listing comes out. Is that when you will know? So something like that. So basically kind of letting the applicants know there is a guideline and they can refer to it, and that's a guideline we follow as well.
Yeah, I know. So I was mentioning like last year for us, it was interesting because I got a lot of applicants that we had interviewed asking where they ranked. And I didn't experience that to that degree the year before. I think I had maybe one or two the year before ask me, and basically everybody we interviewed last year asked us where they ranked. So I thought that was interesting, that the change within the year, at least for us. And, I have taken the approach of being very honest with them. So if I have and I always wait for them to ask me. So I don't go and say it to them unless I've been asked. So if somebody's asking me, say, I have had ones who were our top candidate ask us, and I said, you are one of our top candidates. We had like, I forget how many positions we had open last year. So if they were truly one of the top ones that I was going to rank, that, you know, in our first initial ones, I did say you are our top candidate. However, if they were not, I was very honest with them and said to them, you know, we interviewed very select people. You are one of those, you know, few that we interviewed, but you're not our top candidate. And I was, you know, honest with them, for better or worse. But I think that really comes down to the program and what you're comfortable with. Not every program is going to be comfortable with that, and it may depend on how many applicants you have. So I think just really in the end, being honest, and if they're not your top candidate, don't say you're our top candidate. Don't say you're one of our top candidates. Maybe say you're still determining a rank, you know, something like that, or you're not giving people a ranking. So I would say just be honest to them about that in the end. They really shouldn't be asking for a ranking, but this is in case that happens. And sort of related to that, how have you approached expressing your interest to an applicant? Like I said, like for me at least, it was sort of easy because the year before and the year before that, our top applicant emailed me first and said they were interested. So it was easy for me. I said, you are also our top candidate. But how have others approached this? If there's somebody who is really your top candidate by far, have you mentioned that to them, or, you know, do you wait, you know, things like that?
Well, we had an applicant that was our top, kind of unanimously amongst the faculty who had interviewed this person. And I reached out and said that you were our top, and the response was, great, you are also my top cytopathology fellowship. And so as it turns out, and then we felt confident that we were going to get that person. And while we may have been her number or his number one, that person did another fellowship, a different fellowship, like in Surge Path or Breast, I can't remember which. So you know, things get a little tricky.
Yeah.
I think you know, I have I kind of am open to everyone. You know, there's some, you know, that clearly impress you more than others, but for us, I think it was of value to keep our minds open, even for applicants that weren't in that top tier. So I was hesitant to say like you were in the top, or rather to people that were in the middle, that they weren't in the top, for fear that we might have to go to that second tier. And we did. So I'm glad that I didn't potentially discourage that. But, you know, basically, I just had kind of a canned expression that, you know, we really enjoyed your interview. I got some nice feedback, and we're still interviewing, and we'll see how this unfolds.
Perfect. I'm sorry to hear that happened to you, but
Yeah.
I think that was a good approach to things.
Yeah, we were confident. We're like, oh my gosh, we got her number one. And then
Yeah,
didn't
some of them
pursue
can be tricky.
Yeah, that was true.
Some of the applicants are a little shrewd. So I would.
Yeah.
Anybody else?
Yeah,
Go ahead, Rose.
I was just going to say a lot of this, you know, has a lot of parallels to the residency application and interview process, where you're just kind of using select terminology and trying to interpret what the applicants are saying in their correspondences. And then I think similar to Kim, you know, we have some canned text that you can potentially use in cases where maybe they're not your number one candidate. So short of sending them a rank to match email, you can also just be honest with them and say, you know, I really enjoyed our conversation. I personally would be thrilled to see you do your training here, but, you know, kind of like, as what you're not saying is, but I don't have the opinions of the entire group together, or your comparison with the rest of the applicants. But, you know, being honest, like, you know, I was very excited to talk about this and that, and I really hope you consider us strongly in your decision process.
We tried to consolidate all the interviews pretty close to each other. So the rank order, we were not interviewing a candidate like and many days later another one. So we tried to kind of compile them all of it within that week. So that helped us pretty quickly come up with a rank order list, which means that a generic email to the top candidate that we thought was top candidate was sent fairly soon. Just more generic, like, if you have any questions, please reach out to us. You're one of the top candidates, and I hope you had a pleasant experience at the interview, and happy to answer any further questions, and so on. And then that's pretty much how we approach. But compacting those interviews together kind of gave us that quick order listing that we could reach out to the top candidate.
That sounds great. And one thing I do want to emphasize too, like whenever I've communicated to them, I do, especially the ones that I said, are top choice, I do tell them, but this is not a formal offer until October 2nd. So just emphasizing that, we're going by the timeline and, the actual, nothing is official until that date so that they know. Okay, perfect. So that reaches the conclusion of our sort of prepared panel discussion, and I see that there's some things in the chat that I can't see them quite yet. I'm just gonna bring this up, which is again the website. So again, you can go to this website, and this is where this is the ASC timeline website with a summary of the dates which we reviewed. Again, all of this information can be found in the guidelines, which is here. You just click on it and it leads you to that. And then we have a listing of the programs, including those that have filled with their internal candidates. We put into this gray color. So again, by next week, you should know if you filled with internal people. So please let us know either you filled or the number of spots that you have remaining, and we can update that. And again, please do make sure that all of your things are updated. When you click on your program, that's where when it goes to your fellowship link. So double check all of that, make sure everything that you're seeing is what you want to see. And yeah, I think that's it before we go into the chat. I guess I could bring them up here. And if anybody has any questions, I think Jamie is able to open up the forum so that if you have any questions, you could go ahead and say something as well. If I don't hear anything, I could go from what is written here. Kate says, if we offer an in-person component, then why interview virtually? People will feel obligated to attend even if we tell them we are ranking before the in-person visit. So I think, so in terms of like why virtually, I think that it really makes things, like we were saying, more equitable because more people are able to see your program. It just sort of levels the playing field for them. But ultimately, and I don't know if I'm understanding the question completely, but ultimately, it's up to you how you want to conduct your interview. So if you're going to do virtually and in person, or if you just wanted to do in person rather than virtually, that's ultimately up to you. I don't know if I answered that correctly, but
I think for the in-person, it's the applicant, probably the interested applicant, who is probably can request, will sometimes have requested for an in-person second visit.
Yeah.
And it depends on, because they're probably seeing many programs in the same area. For example, this is Monty, New York. They're probably seeing many different programs, and they feel comfortable making the choice of where to be when they come second visit. We've kept it as an option, but it was never a formal thing saying, yeah, we would like you to see you come over, but it was always an option at the end of an interview. So they know that we're not going to shoo them away if they want to come over and visit. So
I would say one thing that I sort of like the idea of, and it's that basically, because we get a lot of applicants here, we're very lucky in that because we get a lot of applicants, we actually go through and we don't offer interviews to everybody because we get so many. But for our top ones, we actually do virtual interviews. And we haven't done this because of COVID. We haven't had the option to do, in-person visits. But I sort of like the idea of interviewing everybody who you're going to interview virtually. And then your top candidates, you can say to them, like, if you want to come in person and experience it. I mean, I look at it partially as an advertisement to them. If people that you want to recruit, you want them to come see your facility in person, and you also want to make sure that they're the right fit for your program as well. So I sort of like that idea, having a virtual component for everybody, but then maybe ones that you if you have a lot of them, then just have some of them come in person, or just allow all of them the depending on how many you have, the ability to come in person if they want. But
And your program has the money to do that?
oh, we don't pay for that. I mean, we haven't paid for them to come. Yeah, I think it's on them that I know of. I don't think that we've paid.
Bringing up the topic of that you had a wealth of applicants and didn't interview everyone. We probably didn't have as many as you did. And there were some, that we had a couple applications that came in complete towards the end of the timeline. And I was hesitant to interview them. I mean, it takes time. We like them to interview with several of the faculty members. It's a lot to set up, but I think because it's an applicant market, as was indicated on the chat, for some programs, we benefited from interviewing everyone because the person we got was in that last block.
Yeah.
So had we not done that, I think we would not have matched. And, that's just my 2 cents on that.
Yeah, no, I agree. We actually had the same thing happen last year. I almost didn't accept their application because it was so late, but we ended up actually accepting them. They were, one of the best ones that we interviewed. So I think ultimately that comes down to the program, how they want to. But yeah, you never know. For whatever reason, I forget what that person's reason was. I forget if they were looking into something else before, but for whatever reason, they may end up applying a little bit late. And again, right now we're still applying 2 years out, basically, which may change in the future. But it's still pretty early for them. So other questions. So we are not providing money for applicants to visit. Are others? I don't think that we are. I don't know if others are, but I think that really comes down, maybe taking them out to dinner or something, but not covering like flight and things like that. I think that ultimately comes down to your program. Somebody said us. Yeah, the USCAP Fellowship Fair, that's a good way to also advertise your program as well. And so you've had already 8 outside applications for, as anyone else, we advertise in path outlines. So is the question here, I'm not sure the exact, Michelle, do you want to summarize your question?
Sure. So it's kind of shocking to me that we really honestly have had zero interest. I'm sorry, I'm with University of North Carolina at UNC in Chapel Hill, and we've literally had zero interest in our Cyto 2024 year, but I've had just an insane amount already applicants for the 2025 academic year, and I've never had to work so hard to fill. At least, I mean, we're approved for 2. I will say that, we have had 1, which we can make done. But I mean, there's 1 year in my goodness, almost 10 plus years that we've had no Cyto fellow. So it's just weird, I guess, to me. I've put out a blast on the GMEAS listserv, and goodness, when I first started, my department decided, just like I said in the chat, you know, we would do away with path outlines, but we went ahead and paid the money and advertised there. And we're just, I mean, literally nothing for Cyto 2024, but just a ton of interest for 2025. So I was just curious if other programs were experiencing that, or
Yeah, I have to say, like, last year was an interesting year. I know there was a fair amount of programs that didn't fill. I'm sorry to hear that for you, but there were a lot of people in the same boat. And I think that it's a unique combination of the job market right now is just being, you know, it's just such a great job market. I presented some data at the last webinar, and we have it also in one of the communicator articles, you know, going over like actual data to support some of this. But fewer applicants are also seeking second fellowships. And you think about cytopathology, it goes well as a second fellowship. So that may also be part of it. Maybe we're seeing less cytopathology because they already did another one, and maybe they're not doing a second one because the job market is so good. So there's a number of reasons that I think that, you know, last year was affected. Now, why you didn't get some last year, but are getting a lot this year, you know, I'm not quite sure. Any one year may vary, but I think it's a good sign if you're getting a lot of applicants. And again, I would just really highlight your program attributes to those, you know, applicants, just to try to make sure that you get, you know, fill your spots with them. But yeah, I don't know if anybody else has had a similar experience.
I think we've just relied a lot in the past on folks doing 2 or even 3 fellowships. Like, just the number of fellowship openings out there and all the different subspecialties is a lot. And, you know, even just looking at our class here at Penn, last year we graduated 8 residents in AP, CP, as well as CP only. And, you know, that's 8 residents that go out into the world to do maybe 1 fellowship and then they're done. But then we have 26 fellowship spots in all different subspecialty areas. So it's just, you know, it's like, where are we going to find 26 people to fill all of these different fellowships? And it is a struggle in some subspecialties more than others. So I know we get a lot of folks from smaller programs who don't have internal fellowships, and it is tough because we have to, I think, just interview more people when you don't have enough internal candidates to fill those spots.
I think the other problem is that the applicants have a lot of choices. They're applying simultaneously to cytology, neuropathology, and sexual pathology. So, you know, the number itself is not an indication. I had like 10 applicants apply last year, and I was not able to fill up the position. You feel good about it that so many people are looking at your program. It's one person, it's a one position, but there are so many options out there. You go through the whole process. We interviewed all 10 of them. I didn't get one. So yeah. I don't think it's an indication that if there are 10 people or even 20 people you're interviewing, that it's a good indication that you will get one, because they have too many options. There is job market is good, plus there is no limitation on their side to the number of fellowships they can apply to, not only in one specialty, but in other specialties too. And I am looking at my own residents here. They're kind of undecided. You know, they're saying we are applying to cytology. We're also applying to hemopath. We are still not sure. We'll decide once we get an offer, and then we will decide. So,
and we've made the process easier for them, because if they can interview virtually, it's easier for them to do.
Exactly. Yeah. So you're going to be seeing probably more applicants because they're doing it virtually as well. So they're able to interview at probably a lot more places than what they were before, when they had to go mainly in person to these interviews.
Yeah, you know, in-person options are more for programs in big cities. if we start making an offer of in-person interview, I'm telling you, nobody's going to come here in upstate New York in a small town, other places. Big cities are lucrative. So yes, they would want to come, and, Mass General or other places, they would love to come and visit, but small programs always are at a disadvantage, and especially when we are in the winter belt area. So, those geographical limitations are there. So that's
Well, they're
always-
losing out because I'm from upstate New York and I've moved to Chapel Hill, and I'd come in a second, but I appreciate y'all. Y'all are making me feel better because I'm thinking it was something I was doing, and not that it makes my situation better, but it makes me feel good that I'm just not
Yeah.
slacking.
Yeah,
I
it's
think-
just, Oh.
I think cytopathology and surgical pathology, like the general surgical pathology fellowships, I think probably have suffered the most from being general, because folks are trying to go for some of these maybe smaller fellowship programs in like Surg Path GU. There's only a certain number of them in the country.
Right,
It's like,
right.
if I don't get a GU fellowship, okay, I'll fall back on a cyto
Right.
or a Surg Path general fellowship. But just for marketability of sign out, like they want to grow an expertise in a specific area, and it's cytopathology fellowship and general Surg Path, don't really give you that that level of subspecialty expertise unless you're pairing it with another fellowship. And I think that makes it challenging for us, because we are getting some of these dual applicants more so than transfusion medicine, for example.
yeah.
That's a good point. Thank you.
Yeah, the climate now is completely different than it was just a few years ago. So it came on pretty fast, but yeah, if you just even look at path outlines, look at the number of job openings that are there. It's just exponentially risen over the last few years since, the year or two after, the COVID hit. Thank you, Kamal, for sharing your experiences. And as Sarah also mentions, Kamal wrote an excellent article for the Communicator this month, which was in the email that was sent out by Jamie. So please take a look at that. He did a great job going through his experiences. And thank you, Sarah, for also mentioning your experiences as well.
Maybe we should have a webinar just for starting to understand experiences of various programs with less and less fellowship
Yeah,
applicants, and how
that's
to
okay.
adapt to that atmosphere. Maybe that'll be interesting.
And Roman brings up a good point too that I also wanted to mention at some point, is that for all our program directors and our program coordinators, if there's anything that you feel like you need, like another webinar on any topic, please do email, Jamie, Rose, or myself. We're always open to any ideas that you may have, anything that you need in terms of resources on the general. This is the timeline webpage, but don't forget there's also a program director webpage as well, with a number of resources there. We also upload the podcast that we do, as well as our webinars, and links to other resources. So if there's anything that you feel that you may benefit from, we're always open to hearing that, of course. So please do let us know if there's anything that you'd like, any specific topic or anything like that. We did spend a lot of time trying to update that webpage as well, so hopefully people find it useful. Any other questions from anybody? Again, this data, all of this information can be found on the timeline webpage, which you see here. Everything that we went through again is in this resources, as well as in this guidelines and the code of conduct as well. And please do direct applicants to this as well. Again, members of the APC, including the APC Fellowship Ad Hoc Committee, including myself, we have been doing webinars for resident applicants as well. So again, we're hoping to highlight a lot of these and hopefully make the whole process a lot smoother this year, especially compared to last year. I know there was a few issues. Again, at any point, if there's any concerns, please do feel free to email again, Rose, Jamie, or myself with those concerns, and we'll look into them. And yeah, it looks like there's another question from Rachel.
Yeah, thanks. Hi. I was wondering in terms of maybe in the document, and maybe I missed it, but in terms of acceptance, is this a verbal acceptance by email, text, or is it a document that holds them to it? You know, I think one of the reasons for doing this in the first place was to prevent people from pulling out. But what recourse do we have if someone withdraws?
Yeah,
None.
that's a good question. Yeah, well, not quite none, but but unfortunately, you know, the ASC is limited in what we can do in terms of recourse for, you know, applicants who and I would say generally it's I don't find, from what I've heard, it's programs going against the guidelines, to be honest, you know, going against the code of conduct. It has been more, from what I've heard, applicants. So I'm not so worried about our programs who are participating in the timeline itself. But you know, we do have this code of conduct, which you can see here, which applies to both applicants and programs as well. And so we do list very clearly, you know, some of the things that we had discussed in the PowerPoint. And, you know, we do have within this, and actually, I don't remember if it's here or in, we do have listed that there are, oh, it's in the guidelines. Let me go back to that. Within the guidelines, if you go to the bottom, there are some things that we can do when we know that there has been a breach of the conduct. And, you know, we discussed this in length this year because we would like there to be some sort of penalty to especially applicants who, you know, are really not going by the guidelines. And that includes sending a letter of suspected violation to the applicant, to their residency and including their residency director as well. Again, we technically cannot enforce any of this. You know, there's legal this and that. You know, only so much we can do. But, you know, in terms of like how to communicate to them, I would be very clear. And I think we've sent emails in the past, and we can certainly do that again this year, where we've had suggestions of how to word the offer letter to them. But, you know, I would include, you know, this sort of information as well in that, and just be very clear to them if they accept and then renege on it, that there are some things that may happen if they do that. But again, we are somewhat limited in what we can do. And I would suggest doing it in writing, so sending an email. Now, whether you call them beforehand and then send them, I think that's up to you, but I do like having things documented personally.
Can I just say one other thing? In the chat earlier, we were talking about whether people are coming for a second look at an institution, and whether I was asking if other people were providing money for that, because I actually specifically asked my program, what do we do if someone says, I want to come to visit? And my concern, and we are not providing money, but my concern is that this, you're talking about equitability, and this doesn't sound equitable. If some programs are saying, sure, come over and have a look and we'll take you out to dinner, and some programs are saying, no, we don't have any funds for this. You can come if you want to, but it's on you. It makes the program look different.
Yeah.
So that's just a little bit of a concern.
Yeah.
No, I would agree, but you know, I think there's really only so much we can do, and I don't feel comfortable telling programs, no, you cannot do in person. I do think there's a lot of benefit from seeing an applicant in person. I know we're trying to be equitable both between applicants and also programs, but I personally, this is just me speaking, I feel very strongly it's very helpful to see somebody in person. That's somebody you're going to spend a year with, you know, and we've had, to be honest, some issues with I don't want to get into too much details, but I do think that it would be helpful to see people in person and see how they interact with people and how they interact on a personal level before accepting them for a year. So again, I think, you know, we're trying to make compromises. So having a virtual aspect to it so that everybody can interview, I think is a great way to go. But then after that, it's really up to you and what you're comfortable with, and also what you're able to, allow for if you do have an in-person component of that. And that's really up to each program.
The way we've been handling it on the residency side is like, we do not organize anything formal, like no second look dates or anything like that. But if somebody approaches us and says they're going to be in town anyway, they're looking at housing, they want to just swing by for a tour, that is okay. We, like, the program directors do not meet with this person. We don't set up any interviews or meetings with faculty, but they can like just take a tour with the program coordinator, or maybe like one of the senior residents or a fellow. And we do not spend a single dollar on these people for lunch, dinner, gifts, what have you. So for the equitable portion of it, like in terms of dollars spent, we do not offer anything, no perks.
Vanda, about how many people do you see in person? 10? Less than 10?
We haven't, since I took over, none, because I took over when COVID hit.
Oh, okay.
Before that, when I was assistant program director, we had 2 in person, but we did virtual and then in person. And they just sort of came and we interviewed them at that point as well. And they were sort of our top 2. But I can't really speak too much to that because, yeah, since I took over beforehand, COVID hit, and our policy was just, they cannot come, which I thought was a shame, but that was just our policy, so.
There's a comment in the chat about how some programs maybe are not following the code of conduct, like, or at least not adhering to the interview component of the timeline. Like, residents are interviewing in programs that are participating in the unified timeline prior to it being August 14th. I don't know if this is for a cytopathology program in particular, or some of the other subspecialties, like I think maybe molecular and dermpath may not be adhering to the same exact interview timelines that we are, or application timelines that we are, but we are all still unified around the offer date itself. But in terms of, trying to get everyone to behave in this specific way, there's really not too much we can do besides these small sort of slaps on the wrist. And that might be an argument for going to the match. We still can't control when people are scheduling their interviews, but we can control through the match, when people's applications are going to be released to everybody, and when the offer / ranking / match actually happens.
Yeah, and Cecilia, this is the first that I'm hearing about this. So if there's any programs that you feel are not following the code of conduct, please let Jamie and myself know, and we can keep it anonymous. But
sure.
yeah, I
mean, and this is by the conversation with my own residents that are going to interviews.
I mean, if they have the program name, then, we can, the ASC will look into all of these possibilities. I will say last year, we did get notice of some programs possibly not following the code of conduct and interviewing when they weren't supposed to. Everyone that, or offering at least, everyone that we investigated last year was following the timeline. So actually nobody was in violation after we investigated it. So yeah, there's nothing we can do unless we know of the program, and then we can follow up with them. But if individuals do let us know of these, of the programs in particular, then we definitely follow up on that and see what the situation is. I know in prior years, what the confusion was that some programs were putting some of their positions as part of the timeline, but not other ones. This year, and so technically they were following the timeline. This year, in response to that, and I didn't include this, but it is in the guidelines, it was an all or none positioning. So if you're part of the timeline and you have 2 spots, both of those should be following the timeline. So I don't know if maybe people didn't realize that we weren't as clear as we could be this year, that it was all or none. But I don't know if maybe that's happening. They didn't know for whatever reason that changed, but at least in the past, that's what it had been. maybe your residents aren't clear on which, programs are in the timeline or not. So if they're not participating, then really, they're not participating. So, but yes, if anybody knows of any programs, please feel free to email us, and we keep it anonymous as to, who reported it. But unless we know the program, we can't look into it.
Again, I think we might have to go to a match where it's like most programs are on this same timeline, because otherwise there's all this hearsay, all this confusion.
Yeah.
Some programs are not participating, some programs aren't participating, some subspecialties are participating, some subspecialties are not, and residents applying to multiple programs, they get confused, we get confused, like it's a little messy.
Yep. The match definitely would solve a lot of issues that we've seen, but ultimately, at least in some of the matches, you need at least 75% of total programs to participate. And if you think about it, we went from 76% to 74%. So even though it was only 2% difference, that potentially makes a huge difference in terms of going to a formal match if we went with the NRMP. But that may be a suitable next step. So that really ultimately comes down to our program directors weighing the pros and cons of a formal match with something like a unified timeline, which allows more flexibility, but then you do encounter issues like this, which we cannot control, to be honest.
And we may be able to get a few more programs on board if we went to a match and stopped all this nonsense with folks maybe not interpreting the timeline in the way it's meant to be interpreted.
Yeah, I agree.
So we'll
Anybody
see.
else?
Survey.
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly. We'll see. So please be honest with that survey, how you want to proceed. Again, the ASC is not tied to a unified timeline. And actually, there have been at least a couple other subspecialties that have moved to a formal match. So we're going to learn a lot more from their experiences as well in this upcoming year. Anybody else? Please feel again free to email us with any concerns or any questions.
Have a question. Maybe the match would work better if all the subspecialties are combined. If you're just looking at cytology, I don't know what the applicant program ratio is. If there are too few applicants, then some programs, even if they participate, it's not going to make much of a difference. But even if applicants are applying to several programs and they're part of one unified match, then it makes more sense. At least we would get some candidate in that instance. Even if they're applying, they have to make their choices, because right now they have too many choices from the applicant aspect, but just limiting it to cytology with such a limited pool, I don't know how it will pan out as a match. It would make more sense to have a match with all the other specialties participating in it, but that's not an easy process either.
I would agree with that, except for, we can speak about what is ideal and what's not ideal and what would be helpful and what, but ultimately, I mean, it comes down to the subspecialties, so we can't really control that. As I said, I'm a member of the APC Fellowship Ad Hoc Committee. And so these are things that we discuss with all the subspecialty heads. And, I would be hopeful that if cytopathology moves to a match, maybe other ones will follow suit as well, especially now that a couple of them, including, I don't want to misspeak, but forensics and I want to say heme path are moving to match. Forensics already did their match. But since more and more are moving to a formal match, and actually the more that move to it, the better, because there's things with cost and things like that. But if it basically comes down to the match costs the same if you're on the same date for no matter how many subspecialties there are. And I don't want to misspeak because I don't know all the details yet, but it actually does become easier if one subspecialty does it for additional subspecialties to do it, especially if it's the same date. So I wouldn't be surprised if we were to move to a match that maybe some other ones would also move to a match, but you know, this is just conjecture. Kate?
Yeah, hi, this is Kate Adalo. I'm from the Cleveland Clinic with Rema. I just wanted to kind of come back to this whole idea of equitability and, you know, in-person optional tours and so forth. So I actually talked to our program director about this last year. So it was something I really wanted to do because I agree, it's so hard to get a sense of the candidates, and sometimes it's kind of hard to sell your institution when they're not seeing you in person and seeing those interactions in the hallway and everything. And our program director advised me very strongly against offering this after attending the PRODS meeting, because she said that, you know, the concern is that if you offer any in-person visit, if they make it optional, it's still, it is, but it isn't, because, you know, the candidates who do come in person will still, they will have the sense that they have a better chance of getting ranked. And if part of the reason we want people to come in person is to get a better sense of what they are like, that will influence our decision in our rank list. And it doesn't make a lot of sense to make a full rank list and then meet people, because what if you meet someone and they're total weirdo, you're gonna knock them down the list, right? I mean, so it's not really set in stone. And then also, you know, it gives a somewhat unfair advantage to people who may be local or have more economic means. And so it's, I really want to have people come in person, but I was advised very strongly against offering this in terms of true equitability. You know, she said, if we're interviewing virtually, we need to keep it all virtual. And if you want people to come in person, then you need to make everyone come in person. You really, it's not really fair or truly equitable to have an in-person option, because not everyone is going to be able to take advantage of it, even if, you know, they might want to.
Yeah, I completely hear what you're saying, and the APC takes that recommendation. So they purely recommend that it be virtual. Again, I think it really comes down to the programs, and we do want things to be equitable, but I mean, I think in fairness to programs, the ASC agrees with the APC in recommending that it be virtual, but we cannot enforce that. And I think ultimately programs have to decide, just like programs decide, do they want to participate in the timeline or do they not want to participate in that timeline? I think it ultimately is up to you what you think is equitable and what you feel comfortable with doing.
I think I would not advertise or like say, oh, we have an optional, you know, visit that you can come and do. This is, like I said, mostly for candidates who are proactive and say, hey, I'm going to be in the city anyway, I've already planned my trip. Can I come by the hospital and do a tour? Say, okay, we'll set you up with like the program coordinator, but you'll not be meeting with anyone who has any say in the decision of your ranking. Like maybe just avoid those kinds of interactions. But, you know, if they're going to be on site anyway, it seems silly to not let them into your department to take a look around if they want that opportunity to help them with their own decision.
At the end of the day, I think these are suggestions, right? I mean, the code of conduct has the things that you have to do, should not do.
Mm-hmm.
And the virtual combination, these are all suggestions. It doesn't, and like you said, it depends on the program. Sometimes programs, it helps for the program itself to see the candidate and the candidate first to see the program. So it's a decision the programs have to make then.
We should probably wrap up and send people on their way.
Yeah, that was a great discussion. Again, everybody, this webinar will be uploaded onto the webpage, the program director webpage. And again, please feel free to email any of us with any questions or if you want to continue the discussion. Thanks, everybody. And good luck with everybody doing interviews starting next week. Bye.